For many, this is the most important practice session in all of DirecTV Speed Weeks. Getting set for tomorrow's Gatorade Duel at Daytona that you will see live here on Speed. 39 of these drivers know they're in the Daytona 500. This is just another practice for them. But for the rest of this group, the go or go homers, they can get in the Daytona 500 through the front door by being one of the first two finishers among the non-qualified cars in their Gatorade Duel, or through the back door by falling back on their qualifying speed. So two very different agendas in this final round of practice for tomorrow's Gatorade Duel at Daytona. Hi everybody, Mike Joy, Larry McReynolds, Darrell Waltrip with you. Darrell, if you're one of those drivers on the go or go home list, this next hour is very crucial.
Well, it really is. And one of the things that's really hard to get your arms around, when it's sunny and hot here, we've had a lot of nighttime and we've had a lot of overcast practice conditions. Your car drives a lot better then than it does now, and this is pretty much the way it's going to be tomorrow in these 150s. So right now you're scratching your head like all that stuff that worked all up to now, it's not working anymore, and now you're really frustrated. And you end this practice right here, you won't get much sleep tonight unless that thing is able to go around here, sticking to the track pretty good, holding it wide open. So you're right. The adjustments you make now are the most critical ones you're going to make all week.
Now this is the second hour of practice today, and Larry, the first hour was not exactly error-free. Ryan Newman lost an engine. Joey Logano got into the wall and did some pretty heavy right side damage. So you really got to take care of your equipment so you have something to race tomorrow.
Well, you do. You're walking that fine line. You want to make sure that you run enough laps that you see where this car is going to go once the tires get heat soaked and you burn some fuel out. You want to make sure you put yourself in different positions in the pack where maybe it's not the safest, but you have to be there. But yeah, there are a few things that came out of that first practice that I think has a few people with their eyebrows raised. We did have the engine failure with Ryan Newman. Remember, that's a Hendrick engine. And then we actually, on Robbie Gordon's car, we saw just a little bit of blistering of a right front tire. So that's things we're going to continue to watch in this hour of practice here.
Yeah, as it gets hotter like this, the tires are going to take a little bit more punishment. And I think they're marginal at best. I think they're right on the edge. So if conditions change, we could have a little bit of an issue maybe.
Now we're right about the time that we will race tomorrow live on Speed. Here are the go or go homers. Now we know the drivers in blue, Tony Stewart, Bill Elliott, Travis Kvapil, will race on Sunday based on their qualifying speed. We know that Terry Labonte will at least get in the field by the Champions Provisional. But down through about Scott Riggs, who is there 7th on the list of go or go homers by speed, drivers have a chance to come in through the back door. But this whole list of drivers wants to race their way into the 500 and gain a better starting spot by doing so.
And I can't stress enough, and we're going to stress this during the dual races on Speed tomorrow, that when you look at those go or go homers, the biggest thing they have to do in the mindset is don't get greedy. It doesn't matter if you finish 8th or 18th, as long as you're one of those top 2 finishers of the go or go home group. That's all that matters, and that's where the crew chief and the spotter, they've got to be pretty much on their game to make sure they know exactly where their driver is running in reference to that.
Now in the morning practice, Joey Logano got into the wall coming off turn 4. Combination of maybe the dip on the track and some wind buffeting. Maybe a little driver inexperience to boot, but you see the right side of the number 20 looks pretty pristine compared to the way it ended that session. Dick Berggren.
The crew has worked so hard on that number 20 car to make it look good. He did cave the right side in pretty well. Logano has not had a particularly good time here at Daytona. During the shootout, he was the first out of the event. He crashed out of that race, and earlier this morning he got only 6 laps of practice. So the goal today for the kid that's so good that they call him sliced bread, run this whole practice session without crashing. Steve Burns.
Well, Dick, the story for Kurt Busch, solidly in the race. The question for him is, how do I win the Daytona 500? He said right before practice, I've won a truck race here, an IROC race here, I've won a dual race, but I finished 2nd in the 500 3 times. I've been asked this question all week. I've rewound these races in my head. I think I haven't been aggressive at the right time. In this practice, he said they're experimenting in the front end. Just heard him tell Pat Tryson, the crew chief, I don't like the way this car is handling right now. Pat Tryson said, let's not waste any time. Come back in when you can and we'll start making changes.
And Darrell, that's one of the few areas that you can work in with these race cars. You're pretty much locked into the rear springs. You're locked into the rear shocks. Front springs, front shocks, and sway bar. That's the biggest area that you can work in.
Yeah, and you would say to yourself, why are these guys driving 3 wide in practice when they know they're in the race? Well, there are some cars in there that maybe aren't going to be in the race, but also you got to remember something. If you don't get out there right now and feel your car do that
on cue,
it's going to do that tomorrow, and you can't go anywhere. So you want to get yourself in every precarious situation that you can possibly think of. Give the crew feedback like you're hearing these guys, and then try to fix it.
And that's what's so deceiving. I know we'll continue to put the fastest speeds up there, and it's nice to know that your car will run that fast speed, but you know what? It's not about the speed chart in this practice session. It's about how far you can go and stay wide open and how your car feels in different parts of the pack.
You always go good when you're sucking up.
Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice is brought to you by Toyota. For the latest Toyota racing info, visit toyotaracing.com. Toyota, moving forward. By Old Spice, the official deodorant of NASCAR. And by Ask.com. Get the answer to all your racing questions at Ask.com, the official search engine of NASCAR. Here's our Toyota track description. 2.5-mile oval built by Bill France Sr. through 1958 and opened in 1959 with the first Daytona 500. The track layout is unchanged since then, but for the addition of the safer barriers around the outside. 31-degree banking in the corners. Quickest so far in this practice, Eric Almirola, the Tampa, Florida driver. For Earnhardt Ganassi Racing, that Guitar Hero Chevy.
And Mike, if you just think back to Talladega, the DEI cars were really fast at Talladega. As a matter of fact, didn't the 15 car set on the pole?
15 cars set on the pole here in July, led the first 17, 18 laps, but you're right, they were just as strong at Talladega, including that 8 car.
But one of the things that I love is how the response of the engine package that these guys have. When we go inside one of these cars, you can hear the engine. And just to give you an idea, back a year or two ago, before we came with this package and the COT, we'd be down here, we would be racing a 300 gear, 3.00, maybe a 310, 3.10, and turning the engines around maybe 7,000 RPM if it's a good one. Today, with this package we got now, they've opened up the restrictor plate, created a lot more drag with this big car and the splitter in the wing, and now the gear is a 364.
Wow.
That's a gear we used to pull at Charlotte Motor Speedway or at a 1.5-mile racetrack. And now they've got it in these cars here, and it's really made these cars a lot more easier to drive, I think.
Well, the big difference, Darrell, with this package that we saw Saturday night in the Budweiser shootout is that if you are sent to the back, you're not stuck in the back. Cars can pull up and pass. That's good news for the drivers, and you know what? It's better news for the fans.
Well, it is, and now, I mean, you can let off the gas and give a guy a break if you choose to, and still get back in the throttle and keep up. Before you got out of the gas, you were history.
And we've been watching Kevin Harvick, the 29 car, and of course we saw him get that push down the back straightaway Saturday night in a shootout from Denny Hamlin after he lost the draft twice. But going back to the 8 car and the engine package, remember the 3 Ganassi cars with Felix Sabates, those cars, they get their engines from the Earnhardt Childress group, the engine alliance that was formed a couple of years ago. And I know that's what has to have the Childress cars scratching their head, because we saw it all last year. They can't seem to go out there and cut the fast qualifying lap with the restrictor plate engine, but they have a good race package. Their cars race good, they just don't qualify good.
Well, you know, Larry, first Sunday doesn't pay nearly as well as the second one does.
All I know is Kevin Harvick won the Daytona 500 2 years ago. He won the Budweiser shootout Saturday night. He started last both times. I mean, he was the last. He and Jeff Gordon were on the back row in the Budweiser shootout. So I've seen that down here before. And I told Harvick the day when I saw him, I said, big compliment to the drivers, all I can say.
Yes. Dick Berggren.
Well, there's no question, Mike, but that this Daytona 500 and tomorrow's duels races as well will be all about handling, much more so than we have seen in many years gone by. It's a matter of trying to balance the shock absorbers and springs against the bump stops. And right now, car number 88, Dale Earnhardt Jr., has not got the balance the way they want it. Just before Earnhardt pulled in, he told the crew that the car is so tight that it's shooting him up next to the wall. Handling, being able to hang on to the car is going to be key. Steve.
Mike, Dick, a lot of the same work going on here for Regan Smith. Mike Joy talked at the top of this practice about the guys have to race their way in. Regan, tell us about your progress in this practice.
Made a lot of progress so far. Wasn't happy with the car at all last time out, and pretty happy with it that time. We got a little bit more work left to do to get it where I want it, but all the guys in the Furniture Row Chevy are working hard, and you know, just got to focus on handling today. That's the main thing right now.
Now Smith can race his way into the Daytona 500. He might be able to come in through the back door falling on his time trial speed, but that depends on what the cars that time trial faster than him do. It's a complicated web we weave. The Gatorade Duel at Daytona is tomorrow. We'll find out who makes the Daytona 500, who goes home disappointed, and it all starts at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, right here only on Speed.
You know, we talked about tires just a little bit there, Larry did, and one of the challenges that this car has created for Goodyear is this car is so right side heavy that they found out they can work with the left side tires to try to give these cars some more grip and make them handle better. They can kind of get away with stuff on the left side, but that right side it's real touchy. And actually the tire we've got here is a little tougher than the tire they had here last year. They've toughened the tire up a tad, trying to give it some life. But sometimes when you toughen up that right side tire, the car actually slides more, and you end up using the tires more than if the tire really gripped.
Michael Waltrip almost got into the back of another car, and yikes.
I think it's a teammate.
It's a car he owns.
David Rudiman in the 00 car. Oops. It's like David's car walked up the racetrack. He got out of the throttle. Michael's in the throttle, and pretty close call there.
They continue to draft together. That's Scott Riggs in the 36.
No help in the middle.
Right there.
Clear low, clear low, clear low. 3 wide.
And I think this is something that these drivers for the next 4 days, especially in those dual races tomorrow and the 500 on Sunday, they're really going to have to be on their game, because I think we're going to see a lot of that where a guy has to get out of the throttle to keep from spinning the car out.
Right. Well, you know, it looks like on TV, if you're at home, the guy behind the guy that got run over, he just ran over the guy. But what we never know for sure is, unless we have telemetry, is the guy that gets run over is squeezing up out of the gas, and the guy behind him doesn't realize it.
Well, I think Mike made a great point the other night. Watch the gap in front of the car that looks like he's checked up or looks like he's getting hit from the back, and you'll probably get your answer as to what's happened.
And what can you do about it?
Nothing.
Right.
I mean, you know, you can't anticipate the guy in front of you backing out of the gas all at once.
All you can do is hope you've got the wheel pointed straight when it happens.
Got some room.
You know, the car leading this pack around, that's a feel-good story. Joe Nemechek in that 87 car. Joe has a really good shot of getting in this Daytona 500. You know, he's not safe by no means, but he is the second in line to get in on speed behind Regan Smith. And that's a race team that really was only put together a little over a month ago to get down here for the 500.
It's the 87 of Nemechek, right alongside the number 5 of Mark Martin, outside pole sitter for the 500 and pole sitter for the second dual race tomorrow. Steve Burns.
Mike, just listening to Mark Martin, he told crew chief Alan Gustafson on the last run, he said, I never lost the front end, but the right rear has sunk down. It came out from under me. I need more rear grip. They've made a track bar adjustment, Mike, and they're also contemplating making a spring adjustment.
And you know, you are locked into your rear springs in the rear of this car, as we were talking a little while ago. But one thing that NASCAR will allow you to do is to put a little more spring in the right rear. And then that will help the car to turn and try to give it a little more turning grip.
Yeah, and that right rear spring is so critical. But if you get it too stiff, the car won't travel. And so it wants to slide, it wants to spin out. If you get it too soft, the car wants to sink down and get aero loose. And so it's a real fine line you work with that right rear spring.
riding with David Stremme in the Penske Racing number 12.
I think most of these guys were saying, hey, dude, talking to his crew chief, I thought you said you're going to make my car drive better. When are we going to get around to that part? When are we going to get around to that part?
You know, you heard Dick Berggren talking a while ago, and I want to follow up and do a little explanation about the challenge of what these guys are trying to do. What they're trying to do here, or what they are doing, is almost the same thing that they'll do at California next week, Las Vegas the week after, is put real soft springs in the front and let the car really travel down just to the point that that front splitter is almost scraping the racetrack. How they stop it from traveling anymore is they have like stoppers or shock packers on the shock shaft. They let the shock absorber go in, and it just rides against that just where it's off the ground. They don't get too aggressive with the shocks, but they run those packers, and that's where you've got to find the balance of the car, not get too aggressive, but let the thing travel down, because that's where the speed's at.
And then the flip side of that is you can do it with the spring. I mean, you can put enough spring in the front of the car to hold it off the track, but then you're stuck with that. I mean, the car sets at a certain height all the time, where with the Packers, it'll go right down against the track, right down there and set.
If it's not one thing, it's another.
So which way are we going to go?
Final practice for tomorrow's Gatorade Duel at Daytona that you will see live here on Speed, and will set the field for Sunday's Daytona 500. Right now, 39 drivers know they'll be in the race, but only 2 know for sure where they will start. Martin Truex and Mark Martin on the front row. Everybody else has to earn their starting spot here tomorrow. Dick Berggren.
Kyle Busch is fast. His car is 4th quick on the board, Mike, but he is in the garage. They are working on the nose of the car. He's a bit loose, and the car tends to shoot up the racetrack. And I want to add this, if I may. America, if you need a feel-good story, if you want to get rid of the gloom and doom that you've been reading in the newspapers, come on to Daytona. We had 56 cars take time on Sunday afternoon in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. We've got 50 cars in the Nationwide garage. I've just left the truck garage. It's packed. They've got a terrific feel. So all those who said there weren't going to be cars at Daytona, you got it wrong. The racers have come. They're here. They're here to race this coming weekend. And as for the fans, I talked to Robin Bragg this morning. They are near a sellout for the Daytona 500. So all those people who thought there were going to be tons and hundreds and thousands of empty seats, you missed it. The fun is here. This is where America's upbeat story is. Come on to Daytona this weekend.
Couldn't have said it better.
I tell you the other thing I really am feeling in the garage and everywhere around this, down there in the pits and everywhere else, is the camaraderie is tighter this year than it's ever been before. I hear the haves are really trying to help the have-nots. The information is flowing for your dude. You know, Joe Nemechek, I need to borrow a shock package, and the shocks are expensive, and they're willing to help these guys to get through this race. So I feel it's a lot of good feel-good stuff going on here.
There are 15 single-car teams here in Daytona. Many of them, like Joe Nemechek's, were formed from the bones of teams that merged or dissolved at the end of last season. And of the 1,000 or more racing-related jobs that were lost, quite a number of people have come to small shops like Joe's or like Tommy Baldwin's and say, hey, need any help? I'd like to help out. I want something to do. I want to help out on your car. If you can pay me something, that's great. Otherwise, I want to be involved. I want to see you do well. So there are a lot of these little seedlings and sprouts that are trying to make the race, as long as some established single car operations like that one of James Finch or this one of the Wood brothers.
It's kind of like going to Vegas with a couple $100 in your pocket. Don't sit down at a table where they're playing for thousands of dollars. Go to a blackjack table where you can sit there and play all night on $200. And that's kind of what you got going on here.
And of course, if you can qualify for the Daytona 500, you're guaranteed roughly about $250,000. So that's a great start.
Well, it's a good start, but it pretty much just maybe puts you back even.
Yeah.
So now so then you got to go to the next one and the next one.
Well, estimates of the cost to come down here.
I'm pretty happy with this right here.
And try to make the Daytona 500.
Let's get clear when you can.
The number I've heard most often is right around $100,000 to come here and try, just to come down and try to make the race.
Yeah,
And that probably doesn't count a lot of the capital investment of the equipment and the tools and even the car and the engines you need to bring down here.
Well, you can buy these cars, some of these cars, pretty cheaply from teams that have gone to another generation car maybe. You know, if let's just say a car costs $50,000, you might be able to buy it for $10,000 or $12,000. And then you can take it home and make all the improvements on it. Engines, you got to search around and find you an engine deal. And that's one of those things that sometimes you can't get the top of the line because you can't afford it. But you still got an engine, and it's not a bad engine.
Riding with Dale Earnhardt Jr. right now. He is 21st in this practice session. He's run a total of 11 laps. Had a car in the Budweiser shootout the other night that was fast, but he just couldn't stay up there. Led the most laps, but his car was not good when he would get some laps on the tires. I'm sure that Tony Eury Jr., Dale Earnhardt Jr., even though this is a totally different car, they have totally learned a lot from that race. And you can just see right there, we've been talking about running around here wide open. You can see it on the tack and the miles per hour. It just does not change that much around this racetrack.
Sounds like Martin Truex, our Daytona 500 pole sitter, has had a close encounter. Steve?
And Mike, there's a little bit of damage right where the bumper meets the left rear quarter panel as Martin Truex Jr. brought his pole-sitting Chevrolet into the garage. I heard Kevin Mannion say, I need a fabricator, and the team is going to work. Again, not heavy damage, but any aerodynamic wrinkle is a deficiency, so they're going to go to work on that left rear corner of the one car.
Better be careful saying you need a fabricator. There's a lot of them standing around down there. That'll be all over that thing.
If you fix it, want to learn a little bit about it.
Pick me.
His teammate Eric Almirola is quickest in this practice. Speed's coverage of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice is brought to you by Old Spice, the official deodorant of NASCAR. And by Verizon Wireless. Call more people, use 0 minutes. Only on America's largest mobile-to-mobile calling family. Verizon Wireless.
It's an interesting shot.
Starship Enterprise.
Looks more like the good ship Lollipop. Isn't that where Myers sits?
I believe the bell is the dead giveaway.
Yeah, that's it.
Inside the Hollywood Hotel. Now, Steve Burns was just telling us during that commercial break that he talked to Martin Truex Jr. and Jamie McMurray in the 26 car is the car that got in the back of him. I tell you, Jamie had a fast race car the other night in the Budweiser shootout. He just was a sitting duck down the back straightaway on that last lap.
And Darrell, as we look at Terry Labonte in the Window World Toyota of Randy Humphrey and Phil Parsons and their wives, it looks like we're back to 1976, 1979 kind of racing, because the leader at the white flag, has he become Quack the sitting duck?
Yeah, it seems that way. We've seen that a lot here lately. And I think particularly if you can get somebody like we saw last year in the 500 to go with you, you're going to go right by. You're going to put a Linda Ronstadt on that guy leading the race.
A Blue Bayou.
A Blue Bayou. Hey, speaking of Blue Bayou, he got it blown up. He got his blown up motor fixed.
Yep.
Ryan Newman's back out there and putting down some pretty good laps.
And that's the difference. MRN Radio did a great retrospective the other night, hosted by Barney Hall, of great 500 moments, as they called them. And in 76, David Pearson, Richard Petty, and Benny Parsons, with 20 to go, were the only drivers on the lead lap. So there wasn't any question of going with somebody. Pearson and Petty traded the lead back and forth 3 times in the final lap. And in 1979, it was Cale and Donnie with Richard Petty, Darrell, and A.J. Foyt more than half a lap back. So we didn't have the bunched up finishes that we've had in recent years. But the whole idea of the driver who's leading the white flag better watch out is all right there again.
Well, I think we got into that mode of where leading on the last lap was where you wanted to be. Right. And that was when the cars were so aero dependent and you just couldn't do anything. You could barely get up to the guy, but you couldn't pass him. And that was just because it was a momentum kind of a thing. But now with this engine package and this big old car, when you hook a couple of guys up and they get a little draft off of the car in front of them, man, we saw at Talladega, they look like they've been shot out of a cannon. And we saw it here in last February. And we saw it in the Bud shootout.
It's amazing how 2 cars can do it.
Two cars can
working together.
Can whoop up on you, babe.
Dick?
Jeff Gordon's car is in the garage right now, Mike, and there are smiles all around. He's third quick on the board at this point, but most importantly, he has got a car that handles well. It is stable, it is drivable. Steve Letarte, the crew chief, told me it's not the fastest thing out there, but it certainly appears, after talking to drivers and crew chiefs this morning and early this afternoon, that the fastest car may well not win the race. It may wind up in the fence, because the car that handles well and is stable and can get through those bumps could well win the Daytona 500.
I think one thing Jeff needs to do, and a few others maybe as well, I don't think they run enough laps. I think they put fresh tires on their car. They go out, they run 10, 12 laps. This car's good, and they stop and they cover it up. I think, but based on what I've seen with Jeff's car, where later on into a run, it's a tire-dependent car, it seems like, or setup. I think they need to run more laps and be sure they're good through a whole run, not just in the beginning.
Now we're going to see a lot of these two cars in this practice session and throughout the weekend, because yesterday our director Artie Kempner, our producer Barry Landis, took the or Monday the Richard Petty driving experience in replicas of those two cars, and Artie's ready to start his own Cup team.
Yeah.
As the driver owner. So we'll have to have a talk with him and explain.
Yeah, well, he just doesn't know how to do the math. That's his problem.
That was before he heard some of the numbers we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But to follow up on what you're saying, Darrell, I agree. Jeff Hammond and I were talking in the first practice session. If we've got our car out there, we know the safest place is in the garage area, but if we've got our car out there and it's driving pretty good, run me at least 20 to 25 laps. Let's burn that fuel level about half off or better. A fuel run here is about 42 to 44 laps, and let's get those tires good and heat soaked where we can look at everything, and you tell me then it's still driving good, and I'll buy it. We'll put a blanket over it.
And if you don't want to run that many laps, say I don't feel like doing that. Okay, well then take half the fuel out of the car and put the worst set of tires you got on and go run 10 or 15 laps.
I agree.
But some sort of a simulation of what it's going to be like late in a run.
When we come back, we'll tell you who the drivers are that are most likely to race their way into the Daytona 500 based on their practice times. Bull Run is coming, and the only place to see it is on Speed. Our buddy Bill Goldberg takes 12 teams on the ultimate high-stakes road trip, and they'll have to get through his challenges to collect the cash and prizes. It all starts February 19th and only on Speed. Bull Run with Bill Goldberg. So based on practice speeds, Tony Stewart, A.J. Allmendinger, Mike Wallace, and Scott Riggs are the four fastest go-or-go-homers right now, followed by Travis Kvapil, the 09 of Brad Keselowski, and the 23 Mike Skinner. Those drivers, along with Boris Said, have the best chance of racing their way into the field here tomorrow.
But you know what? It does not surprise me. Tony Stewart, we know he's fast, and we know he can win here. But these other two guys, Allmendinger and Mike Wallace, listen, those guys are the guys we got to watch, because Mike Wallace has put cars in the showdown here that probably didn't need to be in, or weren't fast enough to get in, but his driving ability alone and his desire. And Allmendinger, we know the mission he's on. He wants that 44 car in the race really badly.
And that 71 car Mike Wallace is driving, that car, we're looking at it right there, was bought from Richard Childress Racing, and ECR, Earnhardt Childress Racing engines, are supplying the engines for that car, so we know that car should race good.
Jeff Gordon and Robbie Gordon have just jumped up into the top 5 speeds. Here's Steve.
Mike, we're down here in the garage stall of Tony Stewart, and just want to tell you what he's been telling his crew. He says the car is really good in traffic, and it's really good in sucking up into the pack. He said that one car is good, but we're even better. So he's really happy with that 14 car right now.
And the interesting thing about the cars that just jumped up in speed, Jeff Gordon, he's leading a fast pack of cars. Robbie Gordon's at the very back of that group of fast cars, and he was getting a big suck up to the back of them, and that's how he got a fast speed.
No change in the front 5. Big knot of cars out there as we get into about 9 minutes to go in this practice session. We're going to sit back and let you enjoy the sounds of speed.
just heard what they are doing with these engines. It's unbelievable. I mean, we've seen it on our telemetry, 8,600 RPMs, and it stays there. And these guys are going to be running these engines on Sunday for 500 miles. That's, of what I'm hearing, that's the amazing thing I hear there.
Yeah, it is. And you can hear those engines are really working hard. One of the things I've noticed, though, and Jeff Gordon's car is doing really well at getting off the corner down low off of turn 2 and being able to do that off turn 4 under somebody without losing the front end. That's something that is really, really hard to fix, get your race car to do. I saw Jeff come off of turn 2 over there underneath some other cars. Looked like he was able to stay in the throttle. That's how you can win this race.
Eric Almirola, he's getting a little tuned up in that 8 car to make a green flag pit stop. He just practiced coming on the pit road and getting down to 55 miles per hour.
Caution is out as Speed's presentation of Sprint Cup practice is brought to you by Toyota. For the latest in Toyota racing info, visit toyotaracing.com. Toyota, moving forward. By Old Spice, the official deodorant of NASCAR. And by Bank of America, the official bank of NASCAR, where you can get a choice of NASCAR drivers on your check cards and credit cards. A cloud of smoke down in turn 1. You see the left front is down, and there's damage to the splitter on Jamie McMurray's Crown Royal Ford Fusion, and Michael Waltrip has dug himself a hole with the Napa Auto Parts 55. Let's have a look.
It's coming through the trial oval here. Michael on the outside in the 55er, Jamie down low. Ooh, Michael got turned by the 12 car of Stremme, and that shot him into the 26 car of McMurray. You see the 12 car back here, right in there. He's going to run into the back of Michael.
But I believe the reason he ran in the back of Michael, the 9 got loose.
Yeah, now I see the 9 got loose.
Exactly what we were talking about a while ago.
Yep, exactly. Michael led up a little bit and got hit. But look at all that paved area. The cars are still, they're not trying to get airborne like we've seen so many times down here. They slide to a stop. Both cars crank up.
This is from Casey Kane's car.
Inside 2 wide. Crashing behind you. Keep coming. Keep coming.
Just one of those chain reactions that started with Casey Kane in the 9. Let's see here. It's loose.
Yep. Just enough.
Loses momentum, and
yeah, just enough that Michael had to squeeze up, and he got hit from behind by the 12 car.
And then McMurray was on the bottom in the 26. He was just a victim.
Michael went down into him.
We're in it, guys. We're in it.
let's really slow this down and watch the 9 first of Casey Kane, and Michael trying to stay off him.
You know, did you think Michael touched him and got him loose?
Possible, Darrell.
But I think it's because the 9 was getting loose already. It looked like he was tail happy there a little bit before that.
And this is one of these difficult questions we wrestle with. Did the 55 bump into the 9, or did the 9 get loose and lose his momentum and back into the 55? We don't know.
No, but I'll tell you what, that is you're loose as a goose coming through this trial, because you're running 190 mile an hour with not near the banking you have in the corners.
And Stremme, who we initially fingered, was a victim of circumstance.
Exactly.
Everything just backed up on him. And there's David driving back to the garage. Jamie is out of the car and having a look. Steve?
Mike, just moments ago, he was in the race car, very poised but very dejected. He told Donnie Wingo, I don't know exactly what's wrong with this race car, but I'll guarantee you that suspension is bent.
Well, he was just an innocent victim. He was on the inside when Michael came across the inside lane.
Yeah, and the thing that the driver can always tell, we have our steering wheels marked. We're straight up and down, center on the steering box. And if anything gets bent under that front end, the driver can immediately tell, because his steering wheel will be what we call off center, and that's when you know you've got some kind of suspension damage.
Look where Jamie's hand is resting on that fender, and you see that fender pretty well crinkled up, not from the tire because the tire didn't come apart, but from contact. So there may very well be a lot of damage underneath there. There certainly is to the fender.
And then going through that dirt, thing getting airborne and bouncing around, a lot of times there's damage under the car that you just can't see until you get it back to the garage.
And they will not get an opportunity to get back out on the racetrack. They're going to be a lot of work done between now and the dual races tomorrow on both these race cars.
Michael's car's got pretty big damage there in the left rear, I see.
That's where Jamie got the damage to the right front when
Right.
Michael came across Jamie's nose. That's not a good look from the onboard camera.
And these record drivers, they are trying to be very gentle with this race car. I mean, they don't want to create any more damage than's already there.
You know, one thing I noticed that they use, we used to use a chain. Chain's pretty mean.
Yeah.
They use cables now. See that cable?
It's better.
It's a lot less damage to the car using a cable like that it would be if you use an old chain.
One more look and you'll see Casey Kane in the 9 begin to get a little loose. Michael Waltrip gets into him. David Stremme gets into the 55, which comes across the bow of Jamie McMurray. And it's on. Tough practice session for Michael Waltrip. You see the back end of the car moving
Yeah, it's
all around there.
got a broken track bar. I'm sure some of that off-road excursion snapped the track bar loose.
And the group of cars rolled off of pit road, all but Clint Boyer, the Cheerios hamburger helper Chevy.
Yep.
He's just moving the gear shift and flipping the switches around, not going anywhere.
Not feeling his Cheerios right now.
Jamie McMurray talking to his teammate Carl Edwards in the garage area, but this will be the very last run for these guys that are out there. There you see them pushing the 26 car. They changed the flat tires. Now they're pushing it back in the garage area, and I'm sure they'll be going over that car extensively. But a car that had a little problem in the first practice, Dick. How about the 20 car?
Well, Joey Logano has completed 17 trouble-free laps, Larry. They tightened the car up considerably, which was just what he needed very early on, even in shootout practice. We were watching him sawing at the steering wheel and trying to hang on. He's got a car now that he said he didn't want to have him tighten it up anymore. He didn't ask to loosen it up, but no tighter.
And Darrell, I said in the first practice, I think that's what they need to do with him. Tighten that thing up till it's got some tug on the steering wheel. You can always back it off. Don't have that kid loose out on these racetracks right now.
You're 100% right. And just because that's the way Tony drove it, forget that. You can throw that book away. We got to build a book around Joey Logano. He might be sliced bread, but he's going to be a heel if they don't help him a little bit. That's a part of a loaf of bread, you know.
That was very good. I know. It was very good.
Now I know why he missed our first practice. He was down there writing this material.
Could have been the heel. That's a lot better than calling him burnt toast.
Oh, yeah, no.
You've done well.
Just be a heel.
Hey,
Now, our boss's ears perked up when I said that.
Yeah, right.
That old 28 car, Travis Quapple, he's been looking pretty racy during this practice. Ben Leslie turning the wrenches on this car. This is the third Yates entry. Their speed is good enough to have them in the show, but he's 21st quickest in this practice session as well.
Now, Joe Nemechek is now, sorry, wrong number. Let's transpose that. Regan Smith is the fastest go-or-go-home driver in this practice, followed by...
That was wide open, but I used up all that racetrack, you know.
Followed by Tony Stewart, A.J. Allmendinger, and Mike Wallace. Then Scott Riggs and Travis Quapple. Dick?
Ryan Newman, who had engine trouble in the very first practice session, he got all of this practice session in. The engine feel okay to you?
Yeah, the engine feels really good. Hendrick Motorsports does a great job with that. And we'll check into our problem, see what it was. But U.S. Army Chevrolet feels pretty good. Finally got both sides of the balance. So we'll get a happy medium and get ready for the Gatorade 150s tomorrow.
Okay, and get ready for New Smyrna in the modifieds too.
He won that race, I think, over
Monday
there.
night.
Monday night he did, yeah. That's
there
pretty
you
impressive.
see the end of the practice session. Now, just to follow up on Ryan Newman, remember he qualified third in qualifying on Sunday. He was scheduled to start on the outside of the front row in the Gatorade Dual Race number 2, but per the NASCAR engine rule, he'll have to go to the rear of the field for the dual race. The teams get one engine change, but it comes after the dual races before final practice on Saturday.
So he can't change again. The engine he's got.
He can still change. He's going to pay his penalty by going to the rear of the field for the duel.
Okay.
Well, the hard luck driver of this whole practice session is with Steve Burns.
Jamie McMurray, Mike, and Jamie, I heard you on the radio. You weren't sure if anything was bent in the suspension. What do you know right now?
Well, it looks like most of the damage came from just the splitter hitting the dirt. So it doesn't look like there's any suspension bent, but I just kind of looked over it real quick. I think they'll try to fix it. It's awful early in the week to have to go to a backup car already. So I'm guessing that Donnie and the guys will get it over there and get to looking at it and hopefully get the Crown Royal Ford Fusion fixed.
Thank you, Jamie.
Michael Waltrip got into Jamie after Michael had to check up for Casey Kane and got booted by David Stremme. Nobody's fault. Just one of those chain reaction incidents. And here are your practice speeds. The one to note is the 9th spot, Regan Smith. He is the first of the go or go home drivers on the practice chart.
One that impressed me was the guy that was 10th on that sheet. 29 car, Kevin Harvick.
He'll be starting deep in the field
He will.
tomorrow.
Now here are the practice rank of the go or go home drivers, knowing that Tony Stewart, Travis Kvapil, and Bill Elliott are already in the field, at least on speed. I would say any of those top half dozen, maybe even the top 10, have a good chance, odds-on chance of making the 500, but only 4 of them will.
That's the great news and the great story about the dual races. Yeah, you certainly will be following who's leading this race, who'll win this race, but we'll be following the top 2 out of this group in each of those races. That'll be our story.
It's always tense.
NASCAR Camping World Truck Series practice coming up at 5 o'clock. NASCAR live at 6. A couple of us old crocs will reminisce about 1979, 1989, and some other past 500s.
Those are my favorite years.
See you then.